All right, it is that time of week where we run through every NFL team and see where they are at in the power rankings here. This one had quite a bit of change to it from last week, as there's kind of, I think, some course correcting going on. And I will admit, maybe a little bit of overcorrecting that is happening. There's a few teams that maybe based off of just one bad performance, like, hey, nope, this is where I actually want to have you. And so we're going to do that. Swig of water for the working man. And so that's kind of, there's a bit of bouncing around on this one today. So let's just get right into it. We will start at 32 at the very bottom. And I get they just won, but they have been so abysmal this season in their other two games that I simply cannot. It is the Carolina Panthers. Yes, Andy Dalton came in and made this team look competent. And if he is able to ride that wave of momentum into even one more game where this team looks good, then I will probably move them out of the basement in the power rankings. But for now, they stuck there. I just, again, one change at quarterback does not make a team significantly more talented. There are still major issues on this team. Also, as we have seen over the last decade, a win over the Raiders doesn't mean that you are a more talented team or a better team or a good team or even just a bad team. This has been a historically awful team. That game that they won against the Raiders on Sunday, it is the first time in over a year and a bit, like since I think it was week 18, 2022 was the last time that Carolina won a game while scoring more than 20 points. So a game that wasn't just stuck in the mud that they happened to kick an extra field goal in, that just shows you how bad it has been, is that this is the first time that with Bryce Young on the roster, and I get he wasn't starting, but with Bryce Young on the roster, this is the first time that they actually, won a game while scoring more than 20 points. So it's been bad out in Carolina. At 31, it is the New England Patriots. They get an early season surprise win against the Cincinnati Bengals in a win that is looking less and less impressive as the days go on out in Cincinnati. But for the Patriots, again, this is just a bad football team. And I cannot stress enough, the calls to bring Drake May in at quarterback for New England are ridiculous and are just asking to get your young kid killed. There is, and you knew this would happen. You knew the patience would run out with this fan base. Coming into the season, it is so easy to just say, yes, look, we know this is going to be a bad year, so we gotta let the kid just marinate. Let him. You know what? It's a fancy term now. Let him redshirt for a year. That's right. I played NCAA. I know what's up. Let this kid redshirt for a year and grow into this role. And then you watch it for 3 weeks and it sucks. It's like, you know what? Bring the kid in. Let's get some excitement. Let's get something fun in here. Let's do this. No. Patience. Jacoby Brissett is just kind of collateral damage right now. We understand he is very limited in this or any offense. But the reason he is there is because you have nothing else around this kid. And you need to grow the foundation of this team before you throw him to the wolves. You cannot put him behind that offensive line. You cannot have him throwing to those weapons and all of a sudden just absolutely torpedoing any confidence you may have in him. And then you get all of those doubts come in and blah, 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 blah. You cannot. You simply cannot do that sort of a thing to that kid and let him go out there in that way. So no, just halt on your thoughts on bringing in Drake May as the quarterback for this team. At 30, it's Cleveland. This is one where I'm just done. They defensively, they do all these things and it's lovely. Offensively, it's so bad. And so this was my final, okay, no, that's it. I can't. They scored they scored 2 touchdowns against the New York Giants. The first one was off of a fumble at the Giants' 25-yard line that Cleveland was able to pick up and 2 plays later, they're in the end zone. So their one touchdown drive was 25 yards. At the beginning of the game when the other defense wasn't really expecting to have to come on the field and was a little bit shell-shocked at what the hell just happened. So no, I cannot take this team seriously anymore. They are an absolute tire fire. And with the Deshaun Watson contract, they are just beyond help right now. At 29, it's the New York Giants. Yes, they beat Cleveland. I just went over why that is not impressive to me. They now have a game coming up on Thursday against the Dallas Cowboys. That will be a little bit interesting to see how that game actually plays out and how that game goes along. Quite fascinated, actually, to see what that game kind of looks like. But yes, they get a win. Malik Neighbors looks like an absolute force, but there are still so many things wrong with this football team that I'm not going to overreact to a win against a team who I have in the bottom 3. And joining the Giants in the bottom 5, yes, they got a win, but it is the Denver Broncos. They get a win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I found, and as we discussed on Monday, maybe I was overrating a touch, and so we have knocked them kind of down in the knocked them down in the ratings, so to speak here. Tampa Bay. But for Denver, it's nice to see Bo Nix getting a little bit more comfortable, and you can start to see some of the stuff that Sean Payton probably sees in Bo Nix and some of the potential that there might be. I still don't think the kid's that good, but you at least see what it could be instead of the disaster that it has been for the first couple of weeks. So maybe some room for growth for the Denver Broncos moving forward. So to recap, the bottom 5, Carolina is worst, followed by New England, Cleveland, the Giants, and Denver. Just outside of the top 5, my favorite team, the Vegas Raiders. An absolutely abysmal performance on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers has this team now at 27th in the rankings. Gardner Minshew, again, continues to baffle with some bad plays. The team just quits at different times, which is not something they can do with this coach. They cannot run the ball. They have some very good pass catchers. Defensively, a few Olays out there on Sunday. This is a very flawed team, and I think that result against Baltimore is going to be one of the more perplexing as the season goes along. At 26, it's Chicago. This is another one where it was, I've had them a little bit higher, and okay, maybe. We've had 3 weeks. I have confirmed it's bad. The defense is very good. The offense is very bad. Caleb Williams, I don't think is as limited as it is showing. I actually think there have been signs that there is an exciting quarterback there. But I mean, Sam Darnold showed that in his first year. And I'm not saying Caleb Williams is going to be Sam Darnold, although the way it's going right now, Chicago wishes. But there are so many issues on the offensive line, and they, again, cannot run the ball, and the receivers keep getting hurt. But the offensive line is the major issue up there right now. At 25, it's the Tennessee Titans. They kind of have the opposite problem, where I actually think most of the things with this team are working pretty well. It's just the quarterback continues to make some really, really, really bad plays and some really boneheaded mistakes. And it leads to an interesting conversation out in Tennessee. And we kind of talked about this a little bit on Monday, but what do you do? Because I do think the rest of this roster is actually pretty good. And we have kind of seen this division, Jacksonville, and Indianapolis, they're going to come up here pretty quick. And even Houston at the top, we think Houston is a very good team, but they have looked like a very good team for approximately, 5 quarters of the season so far? So it's not like this is just completely out of reach, although at 0-3, maybe it feels like it. But this is certainly a team that I think if you had just average quarterback play, you could maybe make some noise here. But again, you want to see what you have in Will Levis. You want to let the kid develop a little bit more than maybe he has. And you also don't just want to finish at 7-10, right? Like, you want to either be a playoff team or you want this thing to go just absolutely shit awful. And now you are able to go out and draft another quarterback in the first round and continue the progression that way. Because I do think that thing we talk about always in team building for bringing in a young piece, bringing in a young quarterback and allowing him to kind of thrive, they actually have that out in Tennessee. And that is, I think, a very positive thing for the Tennessee Titans if they wanted to go out and get one of the kids in the draft this year. At 24, it is the Washington Commanders. That is a good win on Monday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. And Daniels has shown a lot of the positives and a lot of the negatives around his game. But I think of the young quarterbacks so far, he has shown that there is maybe like he has shown the most upside and the most reason for optimism. I do not think that will continue. Like, I do think Caleb Williams ends up being the best quarterback in this draft, but this kid is legit and he is so much fun. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what he does, because again, you're talking about this division. The Giants, we've already talked about them, so that means they're bad. The Dallas Cowboys have been dreadful. We're talking about them pretty soon. And the Philadelphia Eagles have a couple of wins, but they have looked convincing in none of them. So there is, I'm not saying Washington to go out and win the division. That's not what I'm saying. This defense is just awful. Probably the worst defense in the league, I would say. Carolina exists. Bottom 3 defense in the league, I will say. But with Jaden Daniels out there, we saw for the first couple of weeks, that's why we go over a lot of those stats that we go over on the Friday preview, where they are going out there, they are putting up some yards. Like the EPA per play was good. You had the offensive success rate was good. It was just they weren't putting the ball into the end zone, but they were clearly moving the football. There was just a point where it stopped. And now against Cincinnati, it did not stop. And so now there is an opportunity for this to grow and for you to actually get pretty excited about some stuff going on out in Washington. At 23, it is the Indianapolis Colts. I have been frustrated at times with this team. Yes, a win over Chicago is lovely, and it's nice to have won your first game of the season, but it is another game where Anthony Richardson doesn't look good. It is another game where your defense kind of picks on a opposition that is pick-onable, I guess, and is a game where also you are not necessarily just absolutely blowing teams out of the water in a way that maybe you should have. So, yes, the Colts win. No, they do not look impressive. At 22, it is Jacksonville. I talked about this with Logan Gordon on Sportsnet 960 when I joined him the other day. This is such a disappointing team. Doug Peterson, we have seen now in a couple of stops, Doug Peterson teams get worse over time, not better. And that is happening here. But the roster construction around this team is so weird where, I think Thomas is legit. I think that there is something there with this kid, but that's the only weapon they have. And defensively, I think they're fine. But this team just doesn't have enough around Trevor Lawrence. And I guess saying defensively they're fine when Josh Allen just took their lunch money on Monday is, a choice. But we will see how they are able to kind of build off or try to recover from that. But holy hell, I think this is just a bad football team. At 21, it's the Dallas Cowboys. It is time to sound the alarm. And again, do not look at that fourth quarter and think, oh no, this team's got it. They are right there. Baltimore 100% took their foot off the gas. And also, Baltimore is not traditionally the last couple of years the best closer, which is strange. But still, I have tried to make it a rule this year to not make a play on the Thursday night game. There is something, and we talked about it with Conrad in the chat yesterday. There's just something in the back of my head that's like, you know what? This feels like a spot where Dallas really fucks it up. I like a lot with Thursday night is which team handles that quick turnaround the best, which comes down to coaching. And I have said into any microphone that anyone will let me talk into, I think Mike McCarthy is the most overrated coach in the National Football League right now. I think it's him and Sean Payton. They are neck and neck in that race. And so I do think that the Giants having the coaching edge going into Thursday is an interesting situation. I just like Dallas right now. Dak Prescott has had some very good regular season games for sure. But again, he doesn't have a whole lot to work with. CeeDee Lamb is great, but after that, they cannot run the football at all. The offensive line isn't as good as we've seen it there in the past, and there's no one else to throw to on this team. And defensively, they have a couple of studs, but they have a few duds as well. And they just got bullied by Baltimore in the first 3 quarters of that game. So I think major concerns going on out in Dallas. Toxic with a question in the chat. Is Trevor Lawrence the franchise quarterback we all thought he was, or is it the weapons around him that is the problem? Toxic, I have gone back and forth on this quite a bit over the last little while. And truthfully, I don't really know. Which is not a great answer for sports talk. I know you come here for we'll see. I think you look at some of the stuff that he is missing, and you look at some of the things that he is not doing on a consistent basis at this point, and it is tough for me to say he is a franchise quarterback. I think that he is a fine quarterback, probably even peaks at a pretty good quarterback. But to say he is a great quarterback or a franchise quarterback is just simply not the case. I think when you look at Josh Allen, franchise quarterback, he is a guy who has gone out there and just lit the world on fire with nothing around him. And I get they are built differently, but we aren't just in year 1 and 2 for Trevor Lawrence anymore. We are kind of at a point where that development was supposed to have happened. And like, I don't think he came in the best situation with Urban Meyer and with all of those things, right? But like, he joined Jacksonville in 2021. We are kind of through, like, he's played 53 games in the National Football League here this season. And in those years, 3-14 with Urban Meyer, a disaster. But then 9-8, and 8-8. Oh, he didn't play one game. Now, we kind of wrote it all off as injuries last year. But again, the weapons have not been there. But he is not making the most out of those things. And you just see some of the throws that he is still missing, some of the decisions that he's still making. I think that and look, I just did it a couple of minutes ago. It is a bit of a cop-out to say, look, he doesn't have these weapons. Yes, they should have surrounded him with something better by now. But also, I don't think he has done anything to elevate any of those weapons or to elevate this team. So while they could have built a better team around him, he also, I think, should be better at this point and was expected to be better at this point if we were going to be looking at him in that rarefied air. If you just want, like, if you just drafted him and if the thought around him was like, you know what, this is going to be a good quarterback in this league for 15 years, then you're probably not that bummed with what he's been. But the thought was, this is the best quarterback prospect we've had since Andrew Luck. And honestly, probably the best, if we're being truthful to ourselves, the best quarterback we've had since, quarterback prospect we've had since Peyton Manning. That's the rarefied air we're talking about. That is the level with which he is judged on. And he has not shown that, honestly, for a moment. Like, there hasn't been one game, one month, anything where it has been like, okay, this is the Trevor Lawrence we thought we would be getting. And yes, you need help to do that. Yes, you need to end up in the right situations. But at some point, it's also on you. Rant over. Moving on. At 20, it is the Miami Dolphins. And I think, speaking of quarterbacks, and oh, do you know what? It's just the weapons. It's just, well, a lot of weapons out in Miami. Skylar Thompson didn't do diddly squat with them. And we're not expecting Tim Boyle to do diddly squat with them. So, ergo, let's be nicer to Tua. Hey? Because Tua, when he is at the helm of this offense, at least at times, it looks like one of the most dominant offenses you can have in the NFL. That has not been the case with these guys. Put Trevor Lawrence with this team, they probably look pretty good. But do they get to the heights of Tua? I don't know. But right now, it looks abysmal out there. And the defense kind of got carved up a little bit by Seattle as well. But no, it is very bad out in Miami. So they are down in the toward the bottom third of the league at number 20. At number 19, it's the Cincinnati Bengals, who apparently Emily Sadler on 960 yesterday talked about how they have always started slow and then built up. Well, it's got to get going. And now, like, you have already, if there was a year to not start slow, it would have been this one. Now, if you had a year where it would have been difficult to not start slow, it also would have been this one. Because you have all of these great pieces on this team, but all of them are pissed off. You have Chase and Higgins, who are big mad because their contract situation super sucks. And you also have Joe Burrow, who can hardly grip a water bottle. And so you kind of needed to shut up a lot of that noise with good starts to the season here. And now it's 0-3. But it's not just that it's 0-3. Losing to the Kansas City Chiefs is not something to get upset about, right? And they were at Arrowhead. That is difficult. But like, you had to be, if you were Cincinnati, you had to be looking at this schedule to start the year and say, at worst, 2-1. At worst, 2-1. Because they were home New England, at Arrowhead, home Washington. You simply cannot lose 2 of those games. 3? 0-3. When you have your first 2 home games of the year against New England and Washington. And Jacoby Brissett and Jaden Daniels whooped you. Whooped would be a bit of an overstatement, but they beat you. That's That's a problem. That is a big problem. That is alarm bells going anywhere. You know, like they are 3 games back of Pittsburgh for first place in this division, which means I haven't looked at buys, but it is at least week 6 or week 7 before you even catch up to them and get to 500 in a conference that does feel a little bit wide open, right? Like there are a couple of teams here in the bottom part of this list that maybe we weren't expecting, right? Like we did not think coming into this year that Miami would be down at 20 in the power rankings at any point. And I think you had to assume one of Jacksonville, Indy, and Tennessee would probably be a little bit higher than they are. But there are still a lot of very good teams in this conference, and it is going to be difficult to work your way through the sewage right now that you have built and get there. I think, again, we are getting that reminder that Cincinnati is actually a poorly run franchise that just happened to get Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, but haven't been able to build off of it since. Coming in at 18, it is the LA Rams, who continue to battle, they continue to win, and they continue to really, really impress me and drive me crazy as someone who has an under on their win total. But we still are feeling all right about that because the injuries that they have had on this team. But Matthew Stafford is like, this is one of the more impressive seasons he has had. He is basically just seeing the Honolulu Blue out there with Detroit. It's like, all right, yeah, this is like some of my years in Detroit, where if Calvin Johnson went down, I had Brandon Pettigrew, and that is that's an issue. I do think that this team will falter, and I do think that there are going to be issues with this club going forward, but right now, they are battling and scratching and clawing. How do you not love this Rams team? At 17, it's the Chargers, maybe a bit more of a fall than they deserved, but offensively, it is a little stuck in the mud, and with the injury concerns around Justin Herbert, that gives you big concerns about this team. Giving up 20 points against Pittsburgh isn't all that to get worried about. It was the first time that the defense was exposed maybe a little bit. Very interesting test this week against the Kansas City Chiefs for a Chargers defense that has looked good, but again, they have looked good against Gardner Minshew, Bryce Young, and to a certain degree, Justin Fields. Bit different this week, so I will be tempted to see who they come up with, or what type of an effort they come up with. Sorry, in this matchup here against against Kansas City, and also like if how Justin Herbert is doing and what he is able to do in a potentially limited capacity, given the injury issues that he has. At 16, it's Arizona. Bumped down a little bit, but still, I am so excited about this team. And I am so excited that we have a Arizona to make the playoffs ticket at plus, I believe it was plus 700. Even, you know what? I said we weren't clicking on it, but a little bit of a sprinkle. A little sprinkle on Arizona plus 1,100 to win that division. And it's not out of the woods yet. So that there's an opportunity there to grow this thing and put something together. But I think this Arizona offense is so much fun to watch. With Kyler Murray doing his thing, yes, he was bottled up a little bit. And that is what can happen when he gets contained. And when the dogs are barking. I don't know if you could hear that outside, but my dog is losing it. I'm assuming the male is here. But I do think that there is some room for growth, obviously, with Harrison. We'll see about the injury to McBride. That does suck and a little bit scary from that sense. But Connor is looking good, and I think they're going to continue to work in Benson and even DeMarcado into this offense going forward. And Wilson, I told you guys before, watch out for him because he is starting to get a few more snaps in this offense and get a few things going. So I'm excited to see what this Arizona offense can do. And defensively, again, it hasn't been as bad as it was last year or even as bad as we anticipated. Now, again, that is against a Rams team that was banged up. That is against a Detroit Lions offense that has kind of stumbled so far and has not really looked great. And so that is a concern, I think, for this team, is that the one good offense they faced, they kind of got carved up against. I do think Detroit ends up being a good offense. They're just not playing like one right now. So we'll see what they're able to do. At 15, it is New Orleans. I will not lie to you, I took great glee in dropping New Orleans down in the power rankings this week. I think this week showed some of the vulnerabilities of this team. When Derek Carr faces pressure at all, he is an entirely different cornerback. We talked about it with the stats from Warren Sharp in the preseason. He is just not that guy. And Olave is great, and Kamara is great. And so this offense, I do think, will be better than I thought. But when they are not able to stretch the ball with Shaheed, when Derek Carr doesn't have a month month and a half in the pocket, this thing does kind of get bogged down a little bit. Again, the defense is legit, but the offense was a house of cards. And I do not think that it is, well, it's certainly not as good as it looked in the first couple of games of the season, but they had so many issues with this, with this Philadelphia Eagles defense, and their defense gave them so many opportunities, right? You think of the turnovers that Hurts had and the fumbles and the short fields that New Orleans had, and they were not able to capitalize. I think that is very telling for this team. Hey, Deeds, appreciate it. I look, not everyone can be super active in the chat all the time. You are very active in the chat always. So lurking is perfectly fine. I'm happy to. Any lurker is more than welcome here. I've done it on more than a few streams as well. So no, greatly appreciate you hanging out and listening today. Coming in at 14, it is Tampa Bay. Back down to earth a little bit. Like I said, that this was a bit of a wake up call. Like, okay, I'm overrating this team a little bit. That there is still some consistency issues they may have. There is still a bit of a concern that they might have with some stuff on the defensive side. And when they're not kind of dictating how the offense is going, there's some problems there. Also, I think it was very noteworthy how Denver was able to take Mike Evans out of that game. And now Godwin has a good game, but they are better when both guys are going, right? I know in-depth football analysis. When a team's number one receiver can get going, the offense is better. Huge genre-breaking stuff here today on Couch Potato Diary. But no, it's a good team, but I think 14 is probably right around where they should be, just a middle-of-the-pack squad. At 13, it's Atlanta. So can you tell that I'm having some trouble in the NFC South with Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and New Orleans stacked up at 13, 14, and 15. But Atlanta, like again, they came very close against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they put on a decent performance. And Kirk Cousins, again, taking what the defense gives him, allowing Mooney to kind of go out and get his. But I do think that this is still a limited football team. And now Cousins has been kind of getting better as the weeks have gone on and getting a little bit more comfortable. So maybe a little bit of that continues with this Atlanta team. But I do think that there is a ceiling to what they can do. At 12, it's Pittsburgh. I'm buying in more and more. I think this is the best defense in the league. And you guys know, if you were listening to me last year, Justin Fields is my I can't quit you, man. I wish the Raiders would have got him. I thought Atlanta probably should have got him. But now, as he is getting a little bit more comfortable in this Pittsburgh offense, and they're getting a little bit more comfortable with him, I do think that it's starting to make this team look more and more dangerous. Calvin Austin has a big day in fantasy and in real life as well. Pickens is quite talented. They got a good two-headed monster in the running back room. Offensive line is all right. The play calling still is frustrating, and it does kind of scream. Like I was listening to a podcast, and a Steelers fan goes into a coma midway through last season, wakes up and sees that game on Sunday. It's like, oh, Matt Canada's still here. Okay, because the changes have not really been, it's very run heavy, and it's very limiting for this team. But I think Justin Fields is semi-legit. Now, do they keep with him? Because Russell Wilson, I think, would be a pretty big downgrade to this team and would be a bit of a concern going forward for them. But I do think that Fields getting more comfort, hopefully they're getting more comfortable with him and just keep riding with him, because this is a team that could actually surprise some people out in the AFC. 11, just ahead of them, but just outside of the top 10, the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, they get a win, but this is now becoming a very concerning pattern where late game situations just do not go their way. They failed to kill the clock in a number of situations. That they could not get they got one first down that they needed, and they finally got it. But to have some of the issues in putting Baltimore away in putting Dallas away that they had is still a little bit concerning to me. I would love for Baltimore to go out and just be able to really put that nail in the coffin. And it's frustrating because you see what this team is supposed to be. And for a lot of times they are that. But you go back to the game last year against Kansas City. And you go back to a couple of these games. Like they had a 10-point lead on the Raiders and they couldn't put that game away. They have a gigantic lead against Dallas and they have to sweat it out at the end. This is a run team. Lamar Jackson is a running quarterback. You signed Derrick Henry as a power runner. You even have Justice Hill, who is good at running the football. Just go into your strengths. And they just, for whatever reason, they go away from it. And they try to prove that they're not just that team. If you just, life advice here, just be who you are. Be the best version of yourself, and good things will happen. That is what it should be going on with Baltimore right now, and it's just not. At 10, it is the Minnesota Vikings. I'm ready to buy in on the Vikings. Sam Darnold is showing what he is finally showing what he was capable of. Maybe not necessarily, but he's looked good in 3 weeks, and this offense hasn't been that bad. But the reason you buy into this team is because of how damn good this defense is. Brian Flores is coaching up one hell of a defense. They have some guys who are making some really big plays, and Minnesota looks like they are just miserable to play against. And again, as this team gets a little bit healthier, Hawkinson expected to come back at some point. That's another weapon for Darnold to play with. Aaron Jones has been great. Ty Chandler is a little bit interesting in that backfield. And Jefferson, when healthy, is the best wide receiver in football. So you are looking at a team that actually now has a few things that they can put together and is a little bit interesting going forward. At 9, it's the San Francisco 49ers. It is 2 troubling losses in a row to lose that game to the LA Rams. And again, another late game situation for Kyle Shanahan where he tries to get a little bit too cute throwing the ball, has some trouble running the clock out, and allows another team to get back into it. Where have we heard this before? 28-3. So I think that there is real cause for concern out in San Francisco. The Ayuk situation and the lack of opportunities he is getting is just weird at this point, and it's something we brought up in the preseason. This team was incredibly healthy last year, and while we do not hold that against you, we do also understand that that can change, and regression in that world is hitting them like a ton of bricks right now. CMC hasn't played it down for this team this year. George Kittle is back at practice this week, but he's missed some time. Trent Williams got a little bit banged up in that game. Fred Warner was slow to get up on a play in the last game as well. It just is piling on and piling on. The one good takeaway I think you can take from this is it does look like Brock Purdy is playing some pretty good football, and that is, I mean, it's going to get complicated when they have to pay him, but that is something that I think they can really look forward to, is that he feels like a legitimate quarterback now in this league. At 8, it's Houston. I still buy into the talent. I think they have talent on the defense. I think they have talent on the offense. It just hasn't meshed so far this year, and aside from one game against the Indianapolis Colts, and defensively against Chicago, where, again, you send one rusher and you explode their entire game plan, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a very good defense. So they have struggled in that area, and I have concerns, so that's why I have them down at 8, but I can't put them below this next. I couldn't put them below San Francisco, given the issues they had. And while I am buying into teams like Minnesota and Pittsburgh, I can't put Houston below them because I still think the talent is so much better. I do think this kind of figures itself out and this kind of rounds into form, but it's looked a little concerning in the first few weeks. At 7, it's Detroit. Kind of same thing here, right? Like, of course, the year I buy in on Detroit, they have had one good game and a couple question marks. They beat Arizona, but again, a weird 2-minute warning thing away from a pick 6, and an offense that did not put up the numbers that you would think they could against an Arizona defense that is limited. They needed a nice little trick play to Jahmyr Gibbs to get this offense rolling. That concerns me against Arizona. But I like the weapons, I like the quarterback, love the coach, and I think the defense has some pretty intriguing pieces. It just hasn't clicked so far this year, and it's getting a little concerning, but I can't knock them out of the top 10 yet. At 6, it is the Seattle Seahawks. I am buying all in on Seattle. We said before that bringing in the coaches that they did helps to change this defense and kind of maximize what they have on the defensive side of the football with guys like Murphy, guys like Witherspoon, and some of those exciting young players that have brought real good defensive football back to Seattle. But the pace that they're playing with on offense, and it's not like breakneck. This isn't Oregon from way back in the day. It's a normal NFL pace, and that's not something we saw from this team last year. And we have seen, while it's been frustrating in fantasy to figure out between JSN and Tyler Lockett, Charbonnet is a talented running back. When Kenneth Walker comes back, he's a beast. You have DK Metcalf, who is a stud. There's a lot of really talented pieces on this team, and Geno Smith has kind of found it again. So Seattle at 6, I'm a believer. This one pains me a little bit, but just coming off of how dominant it looked, I do have to put the Jets at 5. It has been, I have not been a believer in the New York Jets, but that version of Aaron Rodgers that we saw on Thursday kind of makes you think that maybe this team is for real. Because that was the one thing holding me back, is that I thought Aaron Rodgers was cooked. And maybe he is. A game against New England doesn't really mean you're not. But this team doesn't really have the most challenging of schedules going forward. And again, the talent on the defense is insane. The talent on the offense, we didn't even know that they had a Braylon Allen. And now he is lighting the world on fire as well. Alan Lazard is becoming a very good kind of safety valve if there is some double coverage on Wilson or something like that. This is a very complete team. I think the coach is a little bleh, and I think the quarterback, I wouldn't want to hang out with him. But for now, it is kind of clicking for the Jets. We will see as they face a little bit more resistance. I do think that this spot at 5 is a little temporary, but I do think that this is a team that, despite my best efforts to convince myself otherwise, is probably going to make the playoffs in the AFC. At 4, I have Green Bay. I have been so impressed with the Green Bay Packers being able to work their way through this stretch with no Jordan Love, with Malik Willis going out there and putting up some numbers. And really, you look at it, they could have very easily won that game against Philadelphia. And if that was on a regular field instead of a slip and slide track, then maybe they do win that game against the Eagles. But to come out and get 2 wins with your backup quarterback who everyone thought sucked, and it still might, but still, to get a couple of wins out of that, Matt LaFleur is moving up the coaching genius ranks for sure. And that has been really, it's been fun to watch so far. And it has been, it just makes you think that there is a real complete team here. And again, the thing, talk about it a lot, but this defense has played well. And that was a very big cause of concern last year for them. At 3, it's Philadelphia. It hasn't looked overly convincing, but the defense kind of changing things up a little bit and playing a strong game against New Orleans, I think wakes them up. And again, there's talent. Vic Fangio is a very good defensive coach. He does tend to have a bit of a complex system, and that does take a little bit of time to work in. So I do think, again, this defense gets better as they go along. But Hurts still worries me. But to come up with that win when you basically only have Goddard and Saquon Barkley is really impressive. And we're assuming Brown's going to come back at some point. Hopefully you have Smith able to come back as well after that dangerous hit on Sunday. There's still so many pieces to like about Philadelphia. At 2, it's Buffalo. This has been so much better than anyone thought it was going to be through 3 weeks of the season, that Josh Allen is playing at a full MVP level. And actually, let's just take a look real quick here at maybe a future or two on Josh Allen, because this team is looking significantly better than I thought they were going to this year with some of the weapons they got away from. But Josh Allen has totally found another level. Also, I did not realize how much light my notes were providing me instead of just going to this all black screen. So yes, let's go futures. Let's go awards. Josh Allen, tied with Patrick Mahomes at plus 275 for the lead for MVP. And then the next closest is CJ Stroud at plus 1500. So they know. An interesting one here is Marvin Harrison Jr. at plus 450 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Daniels right now is the favorite. Neighbors is ahead of him. But I wonder if Marvin Harrison Jr. starts to pull away at some point. So, a little bit interesting out there. So maybe a couple of futures to take a look at. There we go. The light's back. But no, Buffalo, what they have been able to do, with the injuries they have on defense, their defense has been shutting teams down, with the exception of Arizona, but no one can. And offensively, when you have taken away the weapons from Josh Allen that he had taken away from him, then I do think that this is something you can get really excited about for Buffalo as they continue to figure out, okay, who should go where and who fits in where. And I still think that they have a little bit more with James Cook that they can unlock as well. So a really fun team in Buffalo. But at number 1, it has to be the Kansas City Chiefs. I can't come on here 2 weeks in a row and tell you guys to calm down. Kansas City is still the best team in the league, and then not put them as the best team in the league. Defensively, they come up with big stops when they need it. Offensively, they come up with big plays when they need it. We know that they are playing with their food a little bit, and no, it has not looked perfect after the Baltimore game. But make no mistake about it, this is still the best team in the National Football League, and is still a team that should be taken very seriously and should be at number 1 in the power rankings. Let me know in the chat if you guys have any disagreements with any of the rankings, or if I went 32 through 1, perfect scores. If you're watching this later on YouTube, let me know in the comments what you think. People have not been shy about comments on my things lately. Some people not thrilled with the Shohei Ohtani take from the other day, but nonetheless, always fun chatting with all of you guys.